The one thing that doesn't change is our mission. And our mission is to develop lieutenants that are leaders of character, that are ready to go out and win our wars, and that are ready to go out and support and defend the Constitution. That is it.
Welcome to the Long Blue Leadership Podcast. These are powerful conversations with United States Air Force Academy graduates who have lived their lives with distinction. All leaders of character who candidly share their stories, including their best and worst moments, the challenges they've overcome, the people and events that have shaped who they are, and who willingly lend their wisdom to advance your leadership journey. Your host for this special presentation of Long Blue Leadership is Lieutenant General retired Mike Gould, USAFA class of 76, and currently serving as a member of the Association and Foundation Board of Directors. And now, General Mike Gould.
My guest today is Lieutenant General Rich Clark, the 21st Superintendent of the Air Force Academy, class of 86 at USAFA, and if I'm not mistaken, you're about 46 days away from retiring after a 38-year career that, when you think about it, it has spanned so much in our country, starting with the Cold War through conflicts in Southwest Asia, in the Middle East, and on into the culture wars that we all experience today. I think his experience on active duty is highlighted most by 7 commands that he's held: a bomb squadron, a training wing, 2 numbered air forces, the Joint Functional Component Command for Global Strike, served as the Commandant of Cadets here at the Academy, and now, like I said, as the 21st Superintendent. In addition to that, General Clark served as the Senior Defense Official and Defense Attaché in Cairo during some interesting times, and also served as a White House Fellow. And if that's not enough, he's flown over 4,200 hours in the B-1, both the EC and KC-135, the T-1, the T-38, the T-6, and the C-21. And most notably, 400 of those hours are in combat. So, Rich, as you look back on the past nearly 4 decades of service, I'm sure you have a lot to think about as it's all coming to an end. And really, how it all started. I'd like you to please share with us a little bit about your life as a young child and, some of the influential people who you met in your formative years, and then kind of how that led you here to the Air Force Academy.
Wow. Well, first, can I call you Coach, General Gould?
Yeah, you call me Mike, Coach, whatever.
I'll call you Coach because you were my coach when I was here, and you saw me walk in the doors here. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but I just want to thank you for letting me be here today. This is a real honor, so thank you. But I grew up in the Bay Area, Oakland, Berkeley, California, and my parents were divorced, so it was my mother, my brother, and I. And then when my mom got remarried, we moved to the East Coast, to Richmond, Virginia, and that's where I went to high school. And not a military family. My dad was drafted back in the Vietnam era. He served a short tour, so I don't really remember those days. So I don't consider myself really from a military family, and really hadn't considered joining the military. I played football. I played a lot of sports growing up. Football was my primary, and track actually, but football the primary. And I had signed to go to William & Mary in Virginia. And I was going with my best friend from high school and actually in junior high. Coach Ken Hatfield came to my house, and Air Force had been recruiting me, so did Army and Navy. And he actually came to my house, though, and visited my parents, and he had dinner at our house. And my mom thought, he is such a nice man. And he was like, look, just come out and see the Air Force Academy. Now, what he did know was that I was very interested in flying more commercial. I always thought I wanted to be a commercial pilot. And he convinced me to come out. My mom was like, just go, it's free. I was like, okay. And so I still had a couple college visits left, so I came to the Air Force Academy. I'll be honest, I got here, and after seeing the place and seeing the opportunities to fly, just to have a great education and to play Division I college football, I was hooked. And my stepdad, who I consider my dad, made me call the coach at William & Mary, tell him I was changing my mind, and I signed and came to Air Force. And when I got off the bus and got on those footprints, I thought, and they started yelling at me, I was like, hey, wait, I'm a football player. You're not supposed to yell at me. That's what I thought, and that was not true. And the rest is history. And, it's an important decision in my life, certainly. But I appreciate Coach Hatfield being persistent and coming to get me and, talk to my parents, formative people, obviously. But it was a great decision. Great decision.
Did you also visit West Point and or Annapolis?
I did not, because I didn't want to go I wasn't interested really in a service academy. What I will say, though, I did fill out an application to Air Force before Coach Hatfield came, and I did go and do an interview with my congressional member because my guidance counselor convinced me to do that in case I didn't get another good offer from somewhere else. And I actually got a congressional appointment, but then I was, I think the Academy had contacted me, and I told them I was going to turn it down. And that's when Coach Hatfield came to my house. But I went through the motions, I think, but I didn't really have an intention to come. I wanted to go to William & Mary, and I wasn't even going to visit Army and Navy because there wasn't something I was interested in.
I'll bet you've looked back and asked yourself the question, what would you be doing now had you gone to William & Mary or one of these other schools?
Hard for me to picture my life without being in the Air Force and the Air Force Academy.
Right. Now, you led on a little bit about it, falling in on the footprints, but as you look back at arriving at the Academy, and you're in now, you've signed up and you're gonna be a Falcon, what kind of memories do you have about basic training and leading into your first fall semester and all like that?
Oh, So here's one memory I definitely have. And I talked to the cadets about this sometime. I mentioned phone booth to them, and they're like, what? What's a phone booth? Well, I explained to them, there was these big boxes that had a telephone in it, and you had a card that you could call home. And in basic training, about halfway through, you got to call home. And I called my mom, and I said, Mom, this place is not for me. I'm ready to come home. She's like, oh, that's great, because the William & Mary coach called last week to see how you were doing. You could probably still get your scholarship, da-da-da. And I was like, oh, that wasn't I was expecting her to kind of go, you better not come home. But she said, that's okay. And truth is, I looked out the door, how they had the glass doors, and all my classmates are lined up out the door, waiting for their turn to come in. And I thought, man, I'm not ready to leave these guys yet. And so she said, you come on home, it's okay. And I said, well, you know what, Mom, I think I'm just going to finish basic training, and then I'll see. I want to stick that out with these guys. I made some great friends, and it's not what I expected, but I like the people. So I stayed. And then basic training, she asked me, you still going to come home? And I said, well, I think I'll stick it out one semester. I'd really like to play football because I've gotten in with the team now, and I got some friends on the team, and so maybe I could play one season. I think I got a good chance to make the varsity, and I did that. And then it was, Mom, maybe I'll stay for my rest of my freshman year. And then, it was like one step at a time until eventually I was like, I'm in. But it was not a done deal for a while for me, where I just said, you know what, this is it. I'm in the right place. I think after that first year, though, I realized that I was. It took some time, though. And football had a lot to do with it. The friends you make, the success we had as a team, that was just great. And I loved my squadron. I was in 7th Squadron. Great, great friends there. So after a year, though, I feel like I was in. But there was that moment in that phone booth in basic training where I was like, man, I don't know. But I did it, and I'm glad I did.
Well, everything you just went through right there was referencing the people. That's what kept you there. But then, you get into academics and you got your military training. How did you navigate some of those things? And I know you had fun with your buddies, and football is always a hoot. But how about the other challenges that the academy threw at you?
Yeah. So I liked academics. I did pretty well. I was on Dean's List most semesters, like 7 of my 8 semesters. I made the Dean's List. So not that I didn't have some challenges. I mean, there's those certain courses that you're just like, oh my goodness. But overall, academics wasn't the big challenge. I think the challenge for me was not having some of the freedoms that you wanted early on, because you're sort of getting acclimatized to it. You're getting used to not being able to do certain things. The military lifestyle, you have to get used to that a little bit. But once I got that, and going back to the people, everybody's kind of struggling with that. And when you're all struggling together, it just makes it a lot more bearable and doable. And I think after that first year, I was in. I was like, I'm in the right place and I'm going to stay here. I did have a moment, though, when I was a sophomore. I tore my knee up playing football. The last game, San Diego State, total just ripped my ACL, my MCL, meniscus cartilage, had to have it reconstructed. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to play football again. And that made me kind of think a little bit about, was I going to stay? And I had to come to terms with some things. Why am I here? What's my real purpose? And as much as football meant, as much as it meant to me, I was here for something bigger than that. And I realized that. And fortunately, at that point when I was injured, I think that was also the point where I really came to terms with why I was here, that it was something bigger than myself, and I wanted to be a part of it. And so I stayed. I was still determined to play, and I did get to play, the next season. But my purpose was a bit different, and that injury really helped me kind of figure things out and sort through my greater purpose.
Gave you that confidence of overcoming adversity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like sports does for us, right?
That's it. Now, back in my day, we didn't really have a sponsorship program, sponsor families in town. But I think by the time you were a cadet, that program existed.
Yes.
Did you have a sponsor family?
Oh,
and were they a big factor in?
They were awesome. The Fravels, Neil and Elizabeth Fravel. I just had lunch with Neil about 4 months ago. We stay in touch, and they're just awesome. And they were so good. They sponsored 4 of us, and they actually gave each of us a key to their house and a key to their third car.
Their car. Wow.
Oh my goodness, that was a lifesaver. And they cooked a lot, and we ate a lot. And they really opened their homes up to us. So I credit them. I mean, they were my second family, and still just love them for what they did for us. They were a great, great sponsor family.
When you were a cadet, did you participate in any formal leadership programs? Did you hold some positions within the cadet wing? And
no, I don't think they thought that highly of me. I wasn't that kind of cadet. I was the DO in my squadron. And that was because one of my buddies was a squadron commander. He was like, "Hey man, will you help me?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll do this." But that was the most leadership experience I got in a formal way. But I was glad to do that. It was still my squadron. Although when I'd tell my friends they had to clean their rooms up and stuff, they'd always give me grief. All these seniors, we're all seniors together. And I'm like, "Who are you to tell me this?" Peer leadership is the hardest thing in the world. But I didn't rise to the level of like group or wing leadership or anything like that. So the cadets are always surprised to hear that. I'm like, nah, I wasn't that good of a cadet. I mean, I was like your average kind of just cadet that did pretty well. And
well, you're being modest here. I watched you lead on that football team. You guys had some success in a really tight group.
We did. I loved our team. We had a lot of leaders on our football team though, and people. I always characterize the leadership on our football team. People knew when they needed to lead. There was just times where someone needed to step up and be a leader. And it might not be that you were the leader all the time, but when it was needed, somebody always stepped up. And that was, I think, the hallmark of our team. It was just a great group of people, humble leaders, all about team success. And I learned as much leadership from football as I did anywhere else here at the Academy. And I credit Coach DeBerry, Coach Hatfield, all of our coaches, and my teammates for just helping me develop as a man and what kind of a leader and person I wanted to be. So that was as much of a leadership laboratory as anything for me.
So it sounds like when it came time to toss your hat and put on the gold bars, you were prepared to go out and be a lieutenant in the Air Force.
I think I was. And my first job was right back in coaching football here. So that was a nice transition from the academy to I taught unarmed combat, PE, and I coached the JV football team. And you were at the prep school then, I think, coaching. So, but that was a phenomenal job. And there was like 8 of us that stayed back and did that. That was just great. And, you had to employ some leadership there because you're trying to lead the cadets, and whether they were on football or in the PE class. So I learned a lot doing that, but I really enjoyed it. I loved being back here. And honestly, it gave me a whole different appreciation for the academy, because when you're a cadet, you are looking about 5 feet in front of you, and you don't stop to look at the mountains, and you don't stop to look at all that everybody's doing to make this place happen, and the passion that people really have for our cadets. That was when I first kind of said, you know what, this place really is special. But you don't get that as a cadet necessarily. Some cadets do. They're special anyway. But cadets like me, I didn't know, and I was just ready to graduate. But that 1 year gave me a whole different appreciation, and I'm grateful for it.
Right. And then you headed off to pilot training, and like most lieutenants, you're going to mix in with a new group of people, a new group of friends. Talk to us about your experience as a student pilot, and then on to start your career flying big airplanes.
Yeah, so me and one of my good friends, Mike Chandler, we decided we were going to go to pilot training together. He was a teammate in football, and we were actually roommates when we traveled. And we decided we're going together. So we both went to Laughlin, and we thought we'll go to Laughlin so there's no distractions, there's good weather. We're gonna kill pilot training. And when we got there, we realized there's no distractions at all, and there was nothing else to do there. But we had a great time because of the people in our class. And we're the only 2 academy grads in the class. But we bonded well as a class, and pilot training was pretty good. I do remember, though, I almost washed out like in the first month because I had a couple bad rides in a row. And you know how you get a couple 3 bad rides and you're out. And especially in those days, we lost half of our class. They washed out 50% of our class. And I had these bad rides, and I had to go to what they call an 89, and what that was, if you failed 3 rides in a row, right? If you couldn't do your no-flap landings and you couldn't get them right in the T-37, then you went to an 88. If you fail the 88, then you go to the 89. The 89 was the elimination ride. And so I had to go to an 89, and I had to fly it with the squadron commander. And the night before, I called my mom again. I always call my mom. And I was like, Mom, tomorrow I'm on my last flight because I flew today. I failed the ride, and I don't think a whole lot's going to change between tonight and tomorrow. And she was like, well, enjoy it because it might be the last time you get to fly an airplane. So you need to at least have fun. It's been your dream, and my heart goes out to you, but enjoy the flight. Don't make your last flight something that was a bad memory for you. And I was like, well, if I fail it, it's going to be a bad memory. She said, but at least have fun. You can have fun.
What great advice.
It was great advice because I went up there, Coach, and I was just relaxed. I even stopped studying. When I called her, I didn't study that night. I went to bed, got up in the morning, didn't get up early and study. I went in there. I did my ground eval. I was usually pretty good in the ground eval. And I just went up and I flew the sortie. I remember he told me to do a clover leaf, the maneuver of the clover leaf, which was my favorite. And I did the clover leaf, and he goes, okay, we can head on back to the pattern now and get your pattern work done. And I said, can I do one more clover leaf? And he's like, I don't recommend it. The one you did was fine. And I said, I know, I just like cloverleaf, sir. Can I just do one more? He was like, okay. And I did another cloverleaf thinking, this might be my last time. I did the cloverleaf, flew back to the pattern. I'm talking to the IP and stuff. I did my landings, really uneventful. Got out of the plane and we're walking back and he goes, I don't even know why you're in this ride. That was a great ride. And I was like, you mean I passed? And he was like, yeah. Great job, Lieutenant Clark, you passed. And what I realized, it was about just relaxing and flying the plane. And it was the best lesson I ever got in an airplane. When you can relax and just do what your training, let your training kick in and just don't worry about it and let your instincts take over, you just fly better. And my mom sort of taught me that. She's like, just relax and have a good time. So I sort of credit her with keeping me at the academy, getting me through pilot training. I mean, she was my mom too, so I give her that credit. But yeah, that was a good pilot training memory. And then went through and, everything's been great since then.
So you head off and you're going to be, you went to the EC 135 first.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about your career progression there as a captain and major and things that you grasp now, you look back on from that period.
Yeah. So here's one big lesson that I got out of it. When I got the EC 130, I wanted to fly a C-130. It was really, I wanted to fly a gunship. And I got an EC 135 and I thought, what? I don't even know what that is. I didn't put it on my dream sheet. How did I end up getting this? I was bummed out. And then one of the IP said, they handpick people to go into the EC 135. I was like, really? Well, because the EC 135 was the airborne command post, the nuclear mission at Offutt, and you always had a general officer on board. And you could only fly with instructor pilots and a co-pilot. You couldn't have a straight aircraft commander in that plane. And the co-pilot had an immense amount of responsibility in that mission, and you got a whole lot of flying time. And when you got done with that assignment in 2 years, you got your choice of your next assignment. And a lot of guys went to fighters. They had to compete for that. But then for me, it was the B1. And I saw that was available. And I learned that when I first walked in the door because several people had gone to FB111s and B1s. And I was like, man, I could do this. I got 2,000 hours in the T-38 because they had the ACE program, the companion trainer program in the EC. And between those two aircraft, I got 2,000 hours, which was plenty for me to go into the B1. And then I flew the B1 basically the rest of my career. And so I was really, one of the lessons I learned, sometimes you get put somewhere that maybe you didn't want or maybe you didn't expect, but you make the best of it. And sometimes there's these sort of hidden benefits and successes that you didn't even know about. But if you go there and just bloom where you're planted, good things happen. And I learned that early, fortunately, in the EC 135. I flew the B1 for 17 years. I flew it at McConnell, which ended up moving B1s out of there. Dyess Air Force Base. I flew it at Ellsworth as a squadron commander. I did do a stint in the Pentagon and legislative liaison in there. And I was also a White House fellow, which was an amazing opportunity for me. But those years in the B1 and doing the Pentagon and the White House fellow were really amazing years. I met Amy in there. We got married when I was stationed at Dyess as a captain. Well, actually, I met her as a captain. We dated, and then I pinned on. But my flying career was just awesome. And my first command was just absolutely a pinnacle point. It was squadron command in the 34th Bomb Squadron, a bomber squadron. And I got into that squadron on September 5th, 2001 is when I showed up for that. And I had just left the White House Fellowship, which was just a fantastic opportunity, but I was riding high September 5th, and then September 11th happens, and everything changed. The squadron deployed, and I wasn't checked out yet in the B1. I had to go through a requal program. And so I can remember when they left, the squadron was shoving out, and they were going, maybe we could just take you as an unqualified pilot, blah, blah, blah. there was no way that was going to happen. And so I can remember that day when they were leaving. They left about a month after September 11th in October. And I just went and helped upload bags. I just did whatever I could to help that squadron out. I wasn't the squadron commander at the time. I was an ADO. But I remember thinking, man, I can't believe the squadron that I was going to go in is going to go without me. But they did, and I helped, and I tried to be as much of a contributor as I could. And when they came back, I was all qualified. And then a couple of months after that, I took over the squadron. And then they tapped us to go again. And so I got to deploy the squadron in combat over Iraq. We deployed to Oman, and we flew missions at the beginning of OIF. And that was just an unbelievable experience, growth experience, leadership experience, but really just something I'll never forget. You know, it was hard. It was tough. We were there for about 6 months. But leading in combat, I think, is something we all prepare for and want to be ready for. But it's also an honor, you know, to be able to have that kind of responsibility. And I think back on it, and my timing couldn't have been better for me to be able to do that. And it was just a highlight in my career.
Can we entice you to tell a quick war story about Distinguished Flying Cross that you were awarded?
Oh, well, I could talk about that. Can I talk about a different story though?
Sure.
I have a better one.
All right.
I do. This was one of my prouder moments, I think. I had, as the squadron commander, I had to line up all the crews, you know, and to put experience with inexperience and make sure that they were balanced out with the people that I knew and who was going to perform the best. And I had 24 crews. They actually sent me extra crews from a different squadron to make sure that we had a full complement. And the last crew that I had were four of the most inexperienced people in our squadron, two captains and 2 lieutenants. And one of them was a brand new FAPE, just come from T-37s into the B-1. And I had to have it. I had to have 24 crews, and they were the last 4 people. And I didn't really have another way to balance the experience and inexperience, so I did it. And the flight commanders were like, don't do it. We can't send these guys out like that. And I said, we have to. They need to go. And so on the second night, they went out. They had 24 JDAM, 2,000-pound GPS bombs. And they started out, they orbited in the area. First they delivered their 12 bombs on target, the directed targets from the ATO, and they hit those targets. And then they were orbiting, waiting for what we called XCAS, somebody to call in and say, I need some bombs. And our mantra in the squadron was, whenever there's Americans on the ground, we're going to do whatever it takes to help them. You will do whatever it takes. And so they're orbiting. And they're about at bingo fuel, and they're meaning the fuel that they needed to go back. And they get a radio call from AWACS saying that there's troops in contact and they need some air power. So they give this crew, you know, the aircraft commander, this young FAPE goes, well, we're close to bingo, but we're not there yet. So give us the coordinates and give us the radio frequency. And they fly, and they get this JTAC, Joint Tactical Air Control, on the ground. And he's like, we're getting shelled from a ridge line. There's Iraqi armored vehicles. They're hitting us hard. We need some bombs. We got 150 soldiers down here. Can you give us some bombs? He's like, got it. Give us the coordinates. So they start getting a 9-line. They're loading the coordinates, and the Wizzo's just putting the bombs. You know, he starts putting them on target. Boom, boom, one at a time. And they get the coordinates, bomb on target, but then they hit bingo. And it's like, and so the aircraft commander tells the JTAC, hey, we're at bingo fuel. We need to get going, or we're not going to be able to get back home, but we'll get somebody else out here. And the JTAC says, if you leave us now, we're going to get pummeled. Can you stay a little longer? He says, we'll stay as long as you want. And so they keep putting bombs on target, and they keep putting them down until they went Winchester. And the JTAC says, hey, the shelling stopped. You guys are cleared out. And when they turned their nose to go home, they didn't have enough fuel to get back. And so they get on with AWACS, and they're talking to AWACS. They're trying to figure something out. They're looking at divert fields. Diverting a B-1 into a field in Iraq is not a good idea. But finally, a KC-135 flies into the country, into Iraq, unarmed and unafraid, gives them gas, and then those guys can come home. And when they got back, they were 3 hours past their estimated arrival time. And I met them at the airplane because I'm going, what happened? And when the aircraft commander comes down the ladder, he's got salt stains on his back. They were working hard. I said, what happened? He goes, sir, we overflew our bingo. I said, well, certainly there's more to it than that. And so we go into the intel debrief, and they told that story. And all of that whole crew was awarded Distinguished Flying Crosses for what they did. And so that, of all the things that happened, to see those young guys go out there and do that and do what they needed to do to help other Americans, to help their fellow servicemen, that made me prouder than anything.
I guess it would. And you took a chance in a way by putting this crew together. And
I did.
You had
I didn't
confidence
have
in them?
as far as I was concerned, I didn't have a choice, but I had to trust them to do their job. And they were trained. I mean, they had received the training that was required for them to go to combat. So we have to trust them to do it, and they did it.
Well, that's a really cool story. And if my math is right, you were about 15, 16 years into your career at that time. Let me shift the gear a little bit. How much thought did you give to staying in touch with or staying engaged with the Air Force Academy while you were out, developing your career path? I gave a lot of thought to it. I used to come back for football games. I came back for my reunions for sure. And I don't think financially at that point I hadn't got involved, but a couple years later, when our class, our 20th reunion was starting, that's when I really started realizing financially I could and should start to give back to the Academy. So that was when I think from a financial point, I really connected and realized that. But just from a present standpoint and coming back, I came back at every opportunity. I came back for games. I came back for some mentorship opportunities that people asked me to come talk to cadets and things like that. But I never thought I would get to come back here to work. I never crossed my mind until someone asked me to be the commandant years later. And that was like beyond imagination for me, especially knowing what kind of cadet I was. I was like, okay, you really want me to be the commandant? I don't think so. But I got that opportunity down the road. I mean, that was after a lot. I went on to be a wing commander. You mentioned I was the wing commander of 12th Flying Training Wing, got to fly all the trainers, and that was just awesome. And then I deployed to Iraq for a year, which was an intense year, hard year. I would say probably the hardest year I've had, in my career. And then I got promoted to 1-star, and they sent me to Barksdale Air Force Base as the vice commander of 8th Air Force. And when I came back from Iraq, I knew I'd gotten promoted, and that job was kind of roundabout. They said, hey, we're going to send you to Barksdale to be the vice at 8th, but that job is actually going to be downgraded to a colonel, and you're about to pin on 1-star, so we're not sure what's going to happen with you next. I was like, oh, man. Trying to remember the lessons of the past, though. I said, okay, this is where I'm going, so let's bloom where I'm planted, right? So we all moved there. Things were great. And then I remember the MAGCOM commander called me in one day, and he goes, get the phone call from the secretary. I'm a newly pinned on 1-star. And he goes, hey, that job you're in is a colonel job. And I was like, yes, sir, I know. But I love it. I was being positive. And he says, but we're going to have to move you out of there. Yes, sir, understood. And he goes, what would you think about going to the Air Force Academy to be the commandant? You could have knocked me over with a feather. And that's when you and I first connected, when I got to come be your commandant when you were the soup. And that was a dream, just a dream to be able to come back here. And that's when I really connected back, when I got a chance to see it even from a different level. I talked about it as a coach, and seeing how special it is and seeing how passionate people are about our school, but being the commandant gave me a whole different view, and being able to engage with the cadets and understand what they were doing and trying to push that development for them, just amazing. And I loved it. And Amy loved it too. Living in the Otis house, having the cadets over, trying to help them with their,
their development. And that's a big job, right? We all know that because you take it very personally because you want them to be everything that they can be. And they're so amazingly talented. You just want to take that talent and give them every opportunity they can to thrive. So we did that. And after that, even Amy, she might as well be a grad. I mean, she just fell in love with this place after those 2 years. Our kids, Milo and Zoe, were both, they were 10 and 8 coming in. Our family just was immersed in USAFA. So,
well, I was going to ask you about the role that Amy and the kids played in your development as a leader, but I got to see it firsthand, and you just went through that. When you had to leave the academy, if you can remember, I'm sure you do remember this, I wanted to keep you here for a third year because you were that perfect role model in so many ways for the cadets. Not only your leadership, in the job, but your family and the way these kids could then look up and say, I want to do that someday. I think I can be like that guy. And we wanted to keep you another year. And then you came out on the 2-star list and you moved on to what was undoubtedly a really, really tough assignment as the DAT and senior guy in Cairo. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, if you remember, at first they told me I was going to the Pentagon to be the A8, which was like the big job. If you were a 2-star, you go there, you do the
right?
A8 as the programmer. And I was like, and Amy loves DC. And so they told us we were going there. And then I get a phone call from then Chief of Staff General Schwartz. Actually, he called and said, hey, I need you to talk to the GO management office, the GOMO, who do all the assignments for the generals. And I was like, oh, yes, sir. Is there a problem? And I think you might have known about that. You probably knew about this already, but because it was bad news, I think he wanted to tell me personally or something. And so I called GOMO and they go, yeah, your assignment's changed. You're not going to the Pentagon. You're going to Egypt. And I go, is there a base in Egypt? And they're like, no, you're going to be working at the embassy as the DAT. And I was like, okay. All right, that's good. And so then the first thing that came to my mind was tell Amy. I was like, oh man, she's going to flip out. Well, I called her and I said, honey, we're not going to DC. And here's the thing, our movers were already en route. Like they were coming to pack us out. And I said, we're not going to DC, we're going to Egypt. I was bracing for impact. And she goes, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? That's amazing. And I was like, what? She could care less about what job I had. She could care less that I was giving up like the best job a 2-star could have. She was just looking for that adventure of Egypt. And that actually took a lot of heat off me because if she's happy, I'm happy. And so we went to Egypt and it actually turned out to be great, but we got truncated on the training. Like you're supposed to get language school. You're supposed to go through this whole defense attaché course. And I didn't have time because it was a late breaking change. And they said, don't worry, you don't need all that training because Egypt's on skids. That was the exact words of the guy that told me I was getting the job. And he meant Egypt is in a good place. They just elected a new president, democratically elected, and everything's good. Well, when we got there, I got to the airport and we're all sitting in the lounge at the airport and I pick up a newspaper and it was in English and it said, that day, the president fired all the top military leaders. I was like, I guess we're not on skids anymore. And it just went downhill from there. I was there for a month and they attacked the embassy. And then a year later, the coup happened. Amy and the kids and all the families from the embassy had to go home. There was an ordered departure. They all had to leave. I remember telling Amy, because I was in the meeting with the ambassador when all this happened, and I said, hey, you might want to pack a bag because I think you're about to go. She's like, pack a bag. I said, you can only pack a carry-on. How long are we going to be gone? I don't know. And they left. And they went to DC and we had no idea. They ended up being gone for 9 months. The kids started school and everything while there was 2/3 of the embassy stayed there and I was part of that. And but it was actually from a professional standpoint, awesome. like to be involved and to be our representative on the military side, to work with the Egyptian military to try to help navigate through this coup d'etat. And they're a country that we were very interested in keeping as a partner. I got a lot of good experience and just cool opportunities to do things. It was a little scary at times, but I actually loved it. And then Amy and the kids came back. We still look at it, even with that, we look at it as one of our best assignments as a family. It was just, the Egyptian people were amazing. The travel that we got to do was incredible. And I just loved the assignment. And it goes back, I mentioned to you, sometimes you get an assignment and you're like, gosh, what? And it turns out to be the best thing ever. And that was one of them.
I thought for sure somewhere in there you were going to say you called your mom and she told you to. No, what a neat
Well, then
story.
I was married, so then I just had to call Amy.
Yeah.
I stopped calling my mom after that. Well, I still call her, but not for advice. I got to call Amy, so.
Well, you had a couple more really challenging assignments, but let's talk about your time as superintendent.
Sure.
Not too many people think that you'll grow up someday and have that type of responsibility. And then when you get here, you realize that it's probably one of the most heavily scrutinized positions you can have in the Air Force.
That's an understatement.
We can both agree on that.
Yes.
But other than the general leadership and the experiences you have throughout your career, this place is different. USAFA is different than any other command. And in many ways more challenging because you just hadn't had that experience. How do you reflect back on your time as superintendent and the fact that you worked through, I think you had 2 presidents, 2 commander-in-chiefs, you had a couple different secretaries, and they all have guidance that comes to you, but your job then is to make that guidance into your own policy.
That's right.
How have you dealt with all that?
Well, honestly, all of us military members, our job is to make the commander-in-chief's policy our policy and to execute that policy. That's our oath, and that's what we do. And so, for me, I feel like we've all done that. I mean, we've all at some point in our careers had to say, this is the law of the land. I mean, I'm going to follow my oath to the Constitution, support and defend, and that's a part of it. So in that aspect, USAFA is no different. But like you said, it's such a fishbowl where everybody has an idea. Everybody thinks they can run the Air Force Academy. Everybody thinks that it should flow along their ideological lines or whatever. And frankly, it's about our country's policies that we have to abide by. But the one thing that doesn't change is our mission. And our mission is to develop lieutenants that are leaders of character, that are ready to go out and win our wars, and that are ready to go out and support and defend the Constitution. That is it. And the policy things that people get so hung up on sometimes, they're really on the periphery. And they're not as entrenched in what we do as people might think. Our core mission has never changed. There's some nuances, there's some things that might change a little bit. Society changes, young people change, people that are 18 to 24, that's a pretty volatile group in a way, and they change with society too. So we have to tweak and adjust based on our superiors, people in the Pentagon and OSD and our president. We have to change based on society and who we have coming into the Air Force Academy. And frankly, parents get a vote in this and the things that happen. So, and alumni always have a voice in this as well. They make their voice well known. But in the end, what it's my job to do is to make sure that our team is inoculated enough from all that we can continue to do our job and make sure that these warfighters are ready to go out and do what those lieutenants and those captains did for me as a squadron commander, that we're putting people out that are ready to go do that. And I always have in mind, like that story that I told you, Coach, it's always in the back of my mind. I hope that I'm developing people that are ready to go out and do what those guys did that day. If our lieutenants are ready to fight like that, then we've succeeded. And that's my goal. I've never been a political person, but I get dragged into it all the time. And my job is to make sure that when I do get dragged into it, that we're still able to execute our mission, and that I don't drag the entirety of the academy into it. And you know how it is. That's our job as leaders, to provide that top cover and that shield so that our people can do their job and produce those lieutenants that are going to go win wars.
Well, that's a great attitude, and you've done it well. Tell me about relationship with the Association of Graduates and Foundation. How have they contributed to your successes here at the Academy, and is there anything that the two organizations could do better?
Well, I will say, let me start off with enormous support from the foundation and the AOG. And it's hard for everyone to really know what kinds of things you guys do for us, but all you need to do is drive around the campus, right? And look at the North Commons area. Look at our new hotel. Look at our visitor center that's coming up. Look at the Cyber Innovation Center that's coming up. Look at our football stadium that's getting built. All those things are either fully private or public-private, that the foundation has to not only raise the money, but facilitate those things happening. And I would say that nowadays, we're not going to have very much construction that's going to happen here, or any growth that the foundation isn't involved in. You're going to have to be involved in pretty much everything that we do if we want to keep evolving as an academy. And since I've been here, the foundation has done that. And the foundation and the AOG are only as strong as our alumni. And I guess I've always known that intuitively, but since I've been here, it is entrenched in me. And I will always be a supporter of our academy from a financial standpoint, from my time standpoint, but it's critical. Not just for our academy, but really for the product. Those 1,000 lieutenants that we put out, they benefit enormously from the help that we get. And those are just the big things. Forget about all of the research opportunities, the travel opportunities, the opportunities to bring in guest speakers, NCLS. There's National Character Leadership Symposium is NCLS. There's so many other things that people don't even know that only happen because someone was willing to put their resources behind our academy. And so, the foundation makes that happen for us. The AOG brings them in, but together, that support is just enormous. And, I get a lot of compliments about people who they see the visitors that we have coming through the Carlton House, the Soup's house. Thousands of people that come through there, cadets, donors, dignitaries, all kinds of people. All that happens because of gift funds from the foundation. We're able to make our academy, represent our academy in a way that people can't even understand. And that also, there's a synergy from that and an exponential effect from us being able to do those kinds of things that most universities do, but the government doesn't always support those things because it's not in a funding line. But the foundation helps us to make those things happen.
Well, you've summed it up pretty well. Our goal is for the association to be relevant in the lives of cadets through their time here at the academy and on through their careers, so that eventually they follow into that continuum where they go to the foundation and say, how can I help? And we're seeing that happen now, and it's nice to hear you recognize that it's been a factor in your time. We're close to running out of time here, Rich, but let me ask you about your next big challenge.
Oh,
Executive Director of the College Football Playoff. This is exciting. What are your thoughts there?
So I am enormously grateful and blessed to even have this job. I still kind of don't believe it, because it's such a dream job. I'm going from one dream job to another, but it's funny. What I'll say is it came out of the blue. A search firm contacted me, and I had known them because I was involved in another search for the Mountain West Conference to find our commissioner. And the people that ran the search knew me just because I was on that panel and everything. And the guy calls me one day. He goes, "Hey, Rich, I heard you might be retiring soon. I think you mentioned to us. Would you be willing to put your name in the hat for the executive director of the CFP? I was like, is that a trick question? Yes. And so he said, now you're the long shot candidate, and they wanted a non-traditional candidate on the, they have 15 or 20 people that they're looking at, but they wanted a non-traditional. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I said, can I ask though, do I really have a shot at this? He goes, yeah, everybody has a shot. I was like, okay. So I got a shot. Let's do this. And I did a phone interview. Then I did a Zoom interview. Then it was narrowed down to 3 and an in-person interview. And I got the job, and I couldn't believe it. But what's really interesting, the things that they liked about me, like they asked me some question, like, do you have any in the interview, they go, do you have any media experience? I was like, no. Do you have any experience in managing college athletic teams? No. Do you have any experience in revenue generation? No. And I thought, I'm just done. But then they started asking me like leadership questions and things that any of us in the military, we would have all knocked them out of the park. There are things that we've all lived and done, things that I learned here, at the Air Force Academy. They weren't hard questions. They were things that are second nature to us. The other thing that they liked was that I played football for 4 years. And being a student athlete myself, they thought that was a big benefit. So really, it goes right back to being here at the academy and getting that job. And now I look at the challenges that it faces, and you just talked about all the scrutiny we get here as a superintendent.
You'll get it there.
I think I'm walking right into another job where I'm going to get scrutinized. It's going to the 12-team playoff, this year. Last year, number 5 team, everybody was all mad and lost their minds. And I think the committee did it right, though. Next year, it'll just be Team 13 that's going to be mad. So I'm ready, though. I'm excited about it. Amy's excited about it. We're going to move to Dallas, which is where the headquarters is. But I still am, I'm sprinting to the finish in this job. So I don't have a lot of time to think about it. But it's nice to know that I have another great job that I'm going to be able to flow into. I feel incredibly blessed by it and just for the opportunity to continue to contribute to student success. And to be a part of that.
That's a really good thought. And let me just ask you to close this out, Rich. Any parting thoughts to your team here at the Academy, to the cadets, and to your teammates as you move on to your second career?
Well, first of all, and you know this as much as I do, as the soup, you're at the head of the table, right? And you're trying to provide the top cover. But it's really so that all of the amazing teammates we have, the dean of faculty, the commandant, the athletic director, the prep school, air base wing, just across the board, all of those people in the flying training group too, even though they're not, they're AETC there, as much of this character development effort that we have, but they're the ones that get the job done. And what makes the Air Force Academy so special is that everyone is so passionate about our cadets and trying to help them to be ready to go out and do the things that we need them to do. That's what makes it special. It's also what makes it kind of hard, though. But I would take hard when people are passionate any day. They just will do this mission, and they will do it whatever it takes to make it right and to make sure that we're giving those cadets everything they deserve. I couldn't thank them enough. From all of our senior leaders right on down to the people in the trenches working at Mitchell Hall. I just love this place because of the people that make it work and that make it go. To our cadets, I'll be very honest. There's people that go, what's wrong with this generation? They don't, they're not patriotic. They're not athletic. These people don't know what on earth they're talking about. Come spend 30 minutes with our cadets, and you'll change your mind. These are the most incredible people. They are patriotic. They want to go serve. They might be different than we were. They might be different than, even the classes before us, but there is no lack of patriotism and them wanting to serve and them wanting to do great things and to reach their destiny. And they are every bit as much leaders of character as anybody this generation. they're better, they're smarter, they're more athletic, they're more in touch with their world around them. I am very happy and comfortable to leave this torch with them, to hand the torch off to them. And I'm just proud to have served with them. And then just to everyone out there, all the supporters of the Academy, and we do have a lot, I just thank them, for letting us do our job, but helping us do our job, and supporting this Academy. So I am leaving with a lot of gratitude in my heart, just from our cadets, from our permanent party, from the alumni that help us do this, and the other supporters. It just makes me feel good about our country. People still care. People still want to serve and to go do great things. And this place exemplifies that like no other.
Well, Rich, that gratitude goes both ways. We're awfully proud of you, Amy, Milo, Zoe, and we just thank you for your years of service and the leadership you've exhibited here at the Academy. You left a mark. Trust me.
Thank you.
And we wish you all the well in the future as you go on about, and please stay in touch.
Thank you, Coach.
With your AOG and foundation.
Yeah, and I'll say this, I thank Amy because she's the one that was willing to go an extra 4 years, because I could have retired as a 3-star when we started, and she said, I'm in. That passion from our time as commandant, she was like, I'm in. Let's do this. And another 4 years wasn't easy for her. I'll be honest with you. She wants to live in her own house. She started a new job, but she owned it, and she loves this Academy too. And I have to thank her and Milo and Zoe. They've just been that's my team. In the end, I thank God for them. I thank God for every opportunity. But I am just full of gratitude. So thanks, Coach.
Well done.
Thank you.
Lieutenant General Rich Clark, 21st Superintendent of the United States Air Force Academy.
Thanks, sir.
Rich.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Long Blue Leadership. If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to subscribe, share it with your family and friends, and post it to your social channels. Long Blue Leadership is a production of the Long Blue Line Podcast Network and presented by the U.S. Air Force Academy Association and Foundation. The views and opinions of the guests and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the United States Air Force Academy, Academy Association and Foundation, its staff, or management. The podcast drops every 2 weeks on Tuesday mornings. Subscribe to Long Blue Leadership on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn plus Alexa, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Search @Air Force Grads on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and more for show announcements and updates. And visit longblueleadership.org for past episodes and more Long Blue Line Podcast Network programming.